5 reasons why a pillowcase is the perfect beginner sewing project. 1, you practice straight lines. 2, you practice corners, which is huge. 3, it's easy and it's quick. I timed myself one time and it took me a little over an hour to make a pillowcase. 4, it doesn't require a lot of fabric, so it's cost effective. 5, everyone needs pillowcases and it's the perfect way to spruce up your place and they make nice gifts. Hello everyone, my name is Juliana Zinchenko and welcome back to my sewing school. If you're new here and this is your first class, let me give you the rundown on what you can expect from my sewing school. You will find all kinds of sewing content from Sew With Me videos to sewing tutorials and sewing patterns. But that's not all we talk about here at my sewing school. And if you've seen my video essays, you know that. This week, I will be doing a whole series on pillowcases. That's right, we got 4 videos this week. Each one is a different method on how to sew a pillowcase. The number one question I get from you guys is, I want to learn how to sew, but where do I start? And there's no right way to start. No matter how you start sewing, you're going to learn and you're going to get better every single time you do it. But I do highly recommend starting with an easy project like this, and it's also so fun. I've made so many pillowcases. So I have 2 options for you guys. I'm going to be teaching you how to sew an envelope pillowcase and then a pillowcase with an invisible zipper. I'm going to be showing you guys 3 different ways you can sew an envelope pillowcase, and then with the invisible zipper, there's just one way to do it. The envelope pillowcase is the easier option. You don't have to worry about a zipper. And then if you want to challenge yourself, you can go with the invisible zipper pillowcase. And we've already had a lesson on invisible zippers, so I know you guys know how to do it. All right, I'm going to show you guys all the pillowcases we're going to be going over this week. This first one is the easiest one. It is an envelope pillowcase using only 1 piece of fabric. This is the front and this is the back. As you can see, you have the opening right here. I love the envelope method because it's so easy to make. It doesn't require any zippers and it looks so nice. My biggest pet peeve is pillowcases where you can still see the pillow on the inside. I'm like, no, thank you. So the envelope method is really nice because you don't need to use a zipper, but you can't see the pillow on the inside. The next one is basically the same thing as our last pillow, but you use 3 pieces of fabric. We got the front here and the back here with the opening. And then the third envelope option, and my personal favorite, is when you're sewing a rectangular pillow. And then it also has this very beautiful detailing along the edge. Look how cute these are. You ain't finding these pillowcases at Target, let me tell you. So when it comes to sewing a long rectangular pillow, it's different from sewing a square pillow because if you were to put the opening in the middle of a long pillow, it would be pretty tough to get it in there. So with a longer pillow, we put the opening close to the side and not in the middle. Like, I just feel like a princess sleeping on this every night. The 4th option is the invisible zipper pillowcase. This one is really nice because, as you can see, it looks the same from both sides. So you can use both sides of your pillow. With the envelope method, of course, you can only use the front side because the back side, you can see the opening. And we have the invisible zipper right along here. And as you can see, it just looks like a seam. This one is really nice because it's super easy, but I feel like it's the most crisp and clean one because you can't see an opening anywhere. And this project is perfect for when you want to keep practicing the invisible zipper, but you don't want to go in with a huge project like a dress or a pair of pants. And this one's very quick, so highly recommend. I'm the biggest believer that you should surround yourself with beauty, beautiful art, beautiful flowers, beautiful pillowcases, beautiful fabrics, beautiful furniture. Your environment is so important. It's your sanctuary, it's where you are every day, and putting effort into it and surrounding yourself with beautiful things to look at, it makes a huge difference, I promise you. This is another reason why I wanted to do a pillowcase tutorial, because pillowcases are such an easy way to beautify your bedroom and to spruce up the place. I am into a very luxurious, feminine, romantic vibe. It's really nice that I can go to the fabric store and create that feeling in my home without spending a lot of money. I think interior design today can be a little boring, and what I mean by that is when you go to the store and you're shopping for pillowcases or furniture or whatever it may be, I just feel like everything is pretty dull and boring. And when I go to the fabric store, I see so many beautiful fabrics, beautiful colors, and I think to myself, why don't they sell pillowcases in this beautiful fabric, or couches in this nice fabric, or chairs? So it's nice that you can go to the fabric store and have endless options when it comes to your pillowcases. Fabric is so powerful. It's all you need to make a simple change when it comes to your environment. For example, I have this vanity chair that I have in my bathroom. I sit on it every single day and do my makeup. I got it a really long time ago, literally when I was like 16 years old, from Target. And it was just starting to look a little old and worn in. And I was like, you know what? I don't need to get rid of this vanity chair though. All I need to do is change the fabric. So I upholstered it, and it made a huge difference. Now, every time I walk into my bathroom, I feel like a princess, and I feel like I'm in the show Bridgerton. I would love to hear your guys' take on interior design, and if you think it has an effect on you and your mood, and also, what is your interior design style? Let me know in the comments below. I could talk about like homes and interior design all day. Here's a little tip when you're making a square envelope pillowcase. So let's say this is the top and the bottom of the pillowcase. You're gonna wanna cut out your pieces so that the opening is horizontal and not vertical. It's not the biggest deal in the world which way your opening is, but I like when it goes from side to side, because when it's sitting on your bed or your couch, you won't see it on the top. Let's flip it. Even if it is on the top, you can't really see it there either. So again, it's just a preference and it's not the biggest deal in the world. Also, if you ever have trouble remembering which direction is horizontal and vertical, I like to remember which way a horizon is. So horizon, horizontal, and then the other one is just vertical. All right, now that I've gone over all of the different ways we're gonna learn how to sew a pillowcase, let's get into the first way, which is how to sew an envelope pillowcase using one piece of fabric. Before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell button to know when we have class next. Like, share, comment, and don't forget to follow me on Instagram for more fashion and sewing content. And much, much more. All right, first let's go over what we're going to need. We're gonna need shears, which are fabric scissors, polyester thread, fabric chalk, a pillow of course, pins, a measuring tape, and a clear ruler is optional, but it definitely helps, and some fabric. Step one, we are going to measure our pillow. I got this pillow with a couch that I bought and I can't stand the look of it. And it's not like a cover you can take off. As you can see the stuffing on the inside. So let's cover this ugly pattern. All right, so we're just gonna measure edge to edge. With a square pillowcase, all sides are equal, so the length and the width will be the exact same measurement. When you measure, you just wanna lightly lay your measuring tape down. You don't wanna flatten out your pillow or anything like that. As you can see here, I'm just measuring from seam to seam. It's very important to keep in mind, when I make a pillowcase, I do not account for seam allowance. Basically, what that means is you don't add any seam allowance. So if I have a pillow that is 20 inches by 20 inches, that's exactly what I'm gonna cut my fabric out to be. And then you'll see in the tutorials, my seam allowance is always 1/2 inch. So We still have a seam allowance, of course, but we don't add any extra fabric. If you're confused, don't worry, it will all make sense when we get into the tutorial. The reason I don't add seam allowance is because I've noticed that when I do, the pillowcase seems like it's too big for the pillow. It just doesn't end up fitting right. And when I don't add seam allowance, it fits the pillow perfectly. So I highly recommend never adding seam allowance when doing pillowcases. But this is just my personal preference. You can account for seam allowance if you want to, and your pillow will still end up looking very nice. All right, so let's calculate the length measurement. My pillow is 18 inches by 18 inches. So what you're gonna do is fill in the two blanks with your pillow measurements plus 8, and that will give you your length measurement. So here's an example with my measurements filled in. My length measurement is 44 inches. And keep in mind here, I did not account for seam allowance, which means I didn't add any extra fabric for the seam allowance. So that's why I just took my exact measurements for my pillow, 18 by 18 inches. If you wanted to account for seam allowance, all you have to do is add an inch to both the length and the width. So for example, mine would be 19 inches plus 19 inches. The reason we add an inch is because our seam allowance is half of an inch. And a half inch plus a half inch equals 1. This number right here is for the overlap and the hem, and with this measurement, we will get an overlap of 7.5 inches. You can always increase this number if you want a bigger overlap, but I recommend this measurement. And the final width measurement is just the width of your pillow, so mine is 18 inches. Now again, if I wanted to account for seam allowance, the final width measurement would be 19 inches. Because I would just add an inch to my pillow measurement, which is 18. So my final measurements are 44 inches by 18 inches. And I just want to clarify that the longer side of a rectangle is the length and the shorter side is the width. The next thing we're going to do is cut out our piece of fabric, and you want to identify the selvage edge. And the reason we do this is so that we know which direction to cut. What's nice about this pillowcase is you only cut out one piece of fabric. When cutting, it really doesn't matter which direction you cut, but if you decide to cut where the length is perpendicular to the selvage edge, this method will only work with pillows that are on the smaller side, like mine being 18 by 18 inches. Let me explain. Let's use my measurements as an example. I have a length that is 44 inches. So if I cut where the length is parallel to the selvage edge, I will need over a yard of fabric because a yard is 36 inches. But if I cut where the length is perpendicular to the selvage edge, I only need about a half a yard of fabric because half a yard is 18 inches and that is the width of my final pillow measurement. So let's say they charge $10 a yard. I am only paying $5 for fabric if I cut this way, and if I cut length going parallel to the selvage edge, I will be paying $12. With that being said, in order to cut where the length is perpendicular to the selvage edge, you need a fabric that is wide enough for your final measurements. When you go to the fabric store, most fabrics come in a width that is somewhere around 42 inches to like 45-ish inches. And then you also see fabrics that have a width measurement that are around 54 inches to 60 inches. So it all depends on the size of your pillow and the width of the fabric you are choosing. Moving on to step 2, I'm going to take my length measurement that we just calculated and then my width measurement and cut out my piece. And then we're going to draw fold lines. And we draw these fold lines so that we know where to fold our fabric for the overlap part. And here is my one piece of fabric. Now I'm going to mark my fold lines on the wrong side of the fabric. And how we get to these fold lines is you're going to take your length measurement and you're going to divide it by 2. That will give you the middle of your piece, and you're just going to draw a line there. Then you're going to take the width measurement of your final piece. Mine is 18 inches, and then I'm going to minus that by 1. So I get 17 inches and divide that by 2. So I get 8.5. So I'll then take that measurement, measure 8.5 from my middle line going both left and right. Here's a graphic just to explain it again. So here I have my fabric piece, and then I'm going to find the middle, draw that line, and then from that middle line, measure 8.5 on one side and then also on the other side. The dotted lines right here is where we are going to fold our fabric. For step 3, we're just going to hem both of the ends, and how you're going to do that is you're going to put your fabric right side up. And using fabric chalk, we're going to draw 2 lines. The first line is going to be 1/4 inch from the edge, and the second line is 1 1/4 inch from the edge. Then you're going to fold at that first line and iron it down. And then this is optional, of course, but I always go in with a tailor's clapper to make it nice and flat. Then you're going to fold at that second line and iron it down. So as you can see, we have 2 folds here. And then you're going to sew a straight stitch as close as you can to the edge there. And don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and end of your stitch. No matter how experienced you are, pinning is always a good idea so that it keeps the fabric in place. I didn't do this for this pillow, but I usually like to increase the stitch length to 4.0 when I'm doing top stitches for pillowcases because I think it gives a more luxurious look. You can go up to 4.5 or 5.0 as well. And when you begin sewing, you want to make sure you have your thread underneath the presser foot, and then you just want to drop your needle down to catch the bobbin thread, and then pull that out so that they're both underneath the presser foot and both are going towards the back of your sewing machine. And then a pro tip is to start sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and the reason I recommend this is because sometimes if you start right at the beginning of your fabric, it can be sucked in by the hole right here. So what I'm going to do is line up the edge right here of my presser foot to the edge of the fabric, so it will act as a guide as I'm hemming. And then I'm just going to move my needle from side to side, and I'm going to lower into the fabric so I see where it's going to end up and see if that's where I want it to be. Another thing I want to mention is, have you ever started sewing and this has happened at the beginning of your stitch? It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's just not cute. I'm going to show you how to prevent it. You're going to want to hold the top and bottom thread taut as you sew the first few stitches, and then you can drop them. Now, of course, I usually use a thread that matches the fabric, but for the sake of this video, so that you guys can see, I'm using black thread. And voila, this is what it will look like when you're all finished. As you can see, you want to get close to the edge, but not so close that your needle doesn't catch the fabric. And as you can see here, we have a nice, clean start to our stitch instead of having just ugly loops in the beginning. Then I'm going to clip the loose threads and iron down the hem. Next, you're gonna have your fabric right side up, and then you're gonna fold at the 2 lines that we drew. And then what I'm gonna do is mark the seam allowance just to make it easier for when I'm sewing, but this is optional. Our seam allowance is going to be 1/2 inch. And I'm also gonna mark the end of the overlap just so I know where it will be when I'm sewing. You can't really see my markings in the video, but this is what it should look like. For the end of the overlap, I just feel out where it is and then mark it, as you can see here. And then using a straight stitch, you're just going to sew at the top and the bottom, and the seam allowance is 1/2 inch. And then you're going to want to backstitch, of course, at the beginning and the end of your stitch, but you're also going to want to backstitch at the ends of the overlap because those are going to experience a lot of tugging. Since I'm not doing a top stitch, I'm going to lower my stitch length down to 3.0. I'm going to line up the edge of my fabric to this line on the throat plate here just to use it as a guide so that my lines stay straight. And then I'm going to move my needle left and right, and then I'm going to lower in the fabric, see if it hits that 1/2 inch mark, and then I'm going to start sewing. Don't forget to hold your thread taut for the first few stitches. And then when you get to the end of that overlap there, don't forget to backstitch. As you can see, I'm doing that right here. And then I'll leave it backstitch a little bit more at the beginning and the end of that hem, just so that it's extra secure. And then as you get to the other hemmed edge, don't forget to backstitch there as well. And then here's a pro tip for y'all. This is something that I've noticed when sewing the envelope pillowcase is sometimes as you're coming up on that hemmed edge, the presser foot can like push it so that it creates this like hump. And then if you just keep going, it can end up looking weird. So what I do right before I approach it is I lift my presser foot and I flatten out that hemmed edge so that it's underneath the presser foot so that when I sew over it, it'll be nice and flat and not weird and humpy. All right, so this is what it's gonna look like when you're all done. See all the places I've backstitched. Then I'm going to clip my loose threads. Moving on to step 5, we're just going to cut the corners. And the reason we do this is to prevent bulk and to create very crisp, clean corners. It's also a good idea to taper it, and I'll show you what that looks like right here. Next, we're going to finish off the raw edges of the seam allowance, either using a serger, or you can use a stitch on the sewing machine that mimics a serged edge. And here I have a couple options for you on the side if you just are using a sewing machine. Or the easiest method is using pinking shears. And since this is just a pillowcase, it's not a big deal what the inside looks like. If you've watched my lessons on bias binding, you know that when you cut fabric on the bias, it doesn't fray. And so pinking shears basically are just making a ton of teeny cuts along the bias. Here is an example of me using pinking shears on another pillowcase, but for this one in this video, I'm going to serge the edges. I'm going to take a scrap piece of fabric and just test out my serger. It's always a good idea before sewing using a sewing machine, serger, whatever it is, to test on a smaller piece of fabric. And then just to be safe, I like to finish off this little bit of a raw edge here with fray check. Now we are almost finished. We just got to turn our pillow right side out and then go in with a point turner for the corners so that they're nice and crisp. And then this is how I turn out the corners. I have one finger on the inside and then the other on the outside, pushing it through. And the corners come out looking pretty good when you do that, but again, I go in with a point turner so that they're super clean. And you basically just go in and you use that pointed edge of the point turner to make it a perfect 90-degree angle, like right here. And last but not least, I'm going to iron the sides of the pillowcase that we just sewed. So what I do for the edges is I use my fingers to shimmy the fabric right up to that seam there, and then once I have it looking like that is when I'll go in and iron it. And voila, we got crisp, clean edges. And we are all done. Enjoy your new pillowcase. And now all we have left to do is put our pillow in it. All right, class, that is it for the one-piece envelope pillowcase tutorial. We have 3 more lessons this week on pillowcases, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell button to know when we have class next. If you make this pillowcase and you post it, please tag me. I would love to see your guys' creations. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to comment below, or you can reach out to me on Instagram at Juliana Zinchenko. Class is dismissed. I will see you in our next video.